I was pouring wine at Rialto. It is the kind of Italian restaurant in Lower Manhattan that calls itself neutral territory, which is just a polite way of saying the contracts signed over the veal chops are heavier than the ones signed in courtrooms. My hand was steady, pouring a Barolo that cost more than my monthly rent. When the man at the VIP table laughed, he was Matteo Vitale. Even if you did not know his name, you knew his gravity. He ran the ports, the logistics, the arteries of the city. He was elegant, Freddacchini wearing a suit that probably cost $30,000. And he looked bored. His voice cut through the clinking of silver. $10 million, he joked, loud enough for the room, holding up his phone. $10 million to whoever can translate this mess, and I will marry you. The table exploded in laughter. Sycophants, men who fed off his power, all grinning. The expensive suit across from him, a man from some American logistics firm, looked pale and confused. The translator Matteo had hired, a nervous man in a cheap suit, was sweating, staring at the phone screen like it was a bomb. I am Eva Lane. I am the shy waitress, the daughter of a dead postal worker from Queens. I am the woman who is supposed to be invisible. Just a pair of hands refilling water glasses, but the words left my mouth before I could stop them. They were not loud, but they were cold, and they were in perfect, sharp Italian. Ho il mio prezzo, non sono in saldo. The laughter died instantly. It did not just quiet down, it was sucked out of the air, leaving a vacuum that pulled every eye toward me. My silver tray suddenly felt like it weighed 500 pounds. I have my own price. I am not on sale. Matteo Vitale stopped smiling. He did not look angry. He looked something else. He raised one perfect eyebrow. The hired translator, the nervous man, gathered his papers, mumbled an apology about a family emergency, and practically ran out the door. He knew he was finished. At that exact moment, phones buzzed around the table, the sharp electronic sound of encrypted emails arriving. The American businessman, the one looking pale, stared at his screen. His face went from pale to sick. I had not seen the screen of Matteo's phone. I did not need to. I had heard the whispers from the translator before he fled. I recognized the dialect. It was not just Italian, it was Neapolitan, mixed with the specific, coded jargon of the longshoremen. It was the language my mother used to whisper into the phone late at night. I knew what the email said without reading it. It was a trap. A penalty clause buried 3 layers deep in maritime code. It looked like a standard late fee, but it was not. It was a linguistic trigger. If the Americans signed a single missed deadline by one ship, just 1 hour, would activate the clause. And that clause would not just cost him money. It would cost him control. It would cede his company's leverage over the entire eastern seaboard. Matteo Vitale watched me. His eyes were dark, analytical, a heavy security guard, a man built like a refrigerator, took 1 step toward me. Matteo raised his hand, just an inch, and the guard stopped. His voice was quiet now, meant only for me. Repeat that. What did you say? I held the tray. My heart was trying to escape my chest, but I held on. The little voice of my father, the postman, whispered in my ear, "Do not be bullied, Ava." I looked past Matteo. I looked directly at the pale American businessman. I refused to look back at the mafia boss. I kept my voice low, just a whisper across the silver bucket of ice. Do not sign it. The deal stopped. The American businessman stood up, his chair scraping the floor. He looked at Matteo. The deal is off. We need to review the language. The room was frozen. Then the impossible happened. Matteo Vitale laughed. It was not a joke. It was a genuine, disbelieving laugh that echoed off the expensive wallpaper. He was a man who rarely smiled, and he was laughing at me. The waitress. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a checkbook, and scribbled. He tore the check out and placed it directly on my silver tray, on top of the wine-stained napkin. "A deposit," he said, his voice laced with amusement. $100,000 for your translation fee. The money sat there, $100,000. It was more money than my father made in 2 years. It was enough to get me out of Queens, out of this job, out of debt. I slid the check off the tray. I held it between 2 fingers, and I placed it back on the table, right next to his plate of untouched risotto. I reached into my apron pocket, my black apron, and pulled out the cash I had, 5 20s, a 10, and some ones. I pulled out a single $100 bill. I placed it on the tray where the check had been. "I sell my skill," I said, my voice shaking just a little, but clear. "I do not sell my soul." The silence this time was heavier. It was absolute. The security guard looked like he wanted to break my arm. Matteo Vitale just stared at me, the laugh gone, replaced by that intense, unreadable focus. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he had just found, something complex and strange. He stood up. The entire table stood with him. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the American, who was already halfway to the door. "We will reschedule," Matteo said. It was not a request. He walked past me. I expected him to ignore me. I expected security to grab me instead. He paused. So close I could smell the expensive cologne, something like sandalwood and ozone. He reached into his pocket. Not the checkbook this time. He tossed a small, heavy card onto my tray. It was blank, cream-colored, expensive cardstock. No name, no number. In the center, pressed deep into the paper, was an embossed symbol. A lighthouse. I stared at it as he walked out of the restaurant, his security detail closing ranks around him. I felt a cold shiver run straight down my spine, a dread so deep it tasted like metal. The symbol, the lighthouse. It was the exact same design that had been tattooed on my mother's wrist, the mother I barely remembered, the mother who died too young, leaving me nothing but a name and a few strange Italian phrases, and that symbol. My shift ended at 11. I walked home. The card heavy in my pocket. Rialto's manager had not fired me. He just stared at me with terror, as if I was a ghost. I was observing myself, like I was watching a character in a movie, the shy waitress, the girl who just talked back to a mafia boss, the girl who just turned down $100,000. The little voice of my father was quiet now, replaced by a different one, my own. The small, stubborn piece of ethics I kept tucked away. "You keep your kindness," it whispered, "even when they offer you the world to lose it." I was walking through the noise of lower Manhattan, but all I could hear was the silence of that room, and all I could see was that lighthouse, pulling me into a past I never asked for. I did not go straight home. The weight of that blank card in my apron pocket felt like a stone, pulling me down. I took the subway. Not toward Queens, but back to Bay Ridge. Brooklyn, I was born there, in a small apartment above a bakery. My mother, Lena, died when I was too young to form lasting memories of her face. Only impressions of her scent, like anise and lavender, and the sound of her voice, whispering in dialects I should not have understood. She left me 2 things. The first was a small, dented silver locket. The second was a shoebox filled with scraps of paper, napkins, receipts, the torn corners of envelopes. On them, in her elegant, looping cursive, were phrases, odd bits of Italian, street sayings from Naples, port jargon from Palermo, words you do not find in a textbook. I walked toward the Verrazzano Bridge, the cold air from the water biting at my face. I needed to see the water, the dark expanse that separated me from the lights of Staten Island. I pulled the locket out from under my waitress uniform. It was cheap silver, worn smooth by years of my own touch. I flipped it open. There was no picture inside, just the engraving on the front, a lighthouse. I pulled the heavy card Matteo Vitale had given me from my pocket. It was still blank, still heavy. I held the locket and the card side by side under the orange glow of a streetlight. The lighthouses were identical. The same stark lines, the same single beam of light, a symbol from my forgotten mother, now resting in my hand as a business card from a mafia boss. It felt like a sacrilege. My life, the one I had built so carefully, was supposed to be simple. This is the mantra I repeat to myself every month when the rent is due. I am Eva Lane. I pour wine during the day. I smile at men who look right through me, seeing only the hands that deliver their food. My tips pay for my tiny apartment, my health insurance, and my electricity. It is a life lived on the margins, invisible. But at night, my real work begins. My apartment in Queens is not a home. It is a library. It is overflowing with borrowed textbooks, stacks of paper and language guides. I taught myself the clean, university Italian, and then I taught myself the messy, real dialects from my mother's shoebox. I moved on to commercial code. I studied maritime law, logistics contracts, the fine print that snakes its way through international trade. I did not do it for ambition. I did it because I wanted to understand the systems that keep people like me trapped. I wanted to read the code. In this entire city, only one person knows who I really am. Maya Ortiz. She is the pastry chef at Rialto, a small woman with eyes that see everything and a laugh that could cut glass. She is my accomplice, my co-conspirator in what we call life experiments. She is the one who helps me test my theories. She is the one I vent to about the staggering cost of living, the shifts that drain us, the customers who treat us like furniture. Maya makes the best cannoli in New York, and she is the only person in that kitchen who is not afraid of the men in the expensive suits. She is my anchor to reality. Rialto itself is a stage. It is not just a restaurant. It is a pressurized container where the rules of the outside world are suspended. It is neutral territory. That means the FBI agents can sit at the tables near the door, drinking their club sodas and watching everyone. They are the audience. But the inner tables, the dark booths cloaked in shadow, those belong to the longshoremen, the union bosses, the logistics men, the men like Vitale, who run the ports. They drink the wine that costs $400 a bottle. The only real law at Rialto is the one that keeps the machine of the city running no bloodshed. It is bad for business. I stood by the pier in Bay Ridge, the smell of salt and diesel filling my lungs. I remembered another scrap of paper from my mother's box. It was a note, written on the back of a utility bill. If you see the lighthouse, Eva, do not turn away. It guides when the shore loses power. For my entire life, I believed it was a metaphor, a poetic, immigrant way of telling me to be good, be the light in the dark. It was the guiding principle of my small, anonymous existence. It was the reason I did what I did. I have always used language to help. It is the only real power I have ever had. When I was a kid, still in Bay Ridge, I used to translate letters for the old Italian immigrants in my building. They were terrified of official paper, letters from the government, bills, lease agreements. They saw them as traps. I remember one woman, Mrs. Bianchi. She was crying in the hallway, holding a stack of papers. A man in a cheap suit was with her, smiling, patting her shoulder, and he was a property manager, he said. Just there to help her with her bills. She was about to sign her apartment over to him. I was maybe 14 years old. I asked to see the papers. My father, the postman, had taught me to read everything. The man's smile tightened. I read the contract. It was not help. It was theft, pure and simple, hidden in dense legal English. I looked at Mrs. Bianchi, and in the Sicilian dialect my mother had scribbled on a napkin. I told her exactly what he was doing. I told her he was a snake. Stealing her home? She gasped. The man's face went purple. He started yelling at me, but I just stood there. I had read the fine print. He left. And Mrs. Bianchi kissed my face, her tears wet on my cheek. That day, I learned two things. First, I wanted to protect the people without a voice. Second, I learned that being kind is not enough. You have to be smart. You have to be naive about people's goodness, but cynical about their paperwork. I learned to listen to New York. Most people just hear noise, a chaos of sound. I hear information. The car horns are not random. They are the city's anxious heartbeat. The squeal of the subway brakes is the friction of the nervous system. And the sound from the ports, that low, constant thud of containers hitting the docks. That is the bass line. It is the rhythm of power. The sound of money and control, the sound of Matteo Vitale. And then there is me. I am the static in between. I have always had this deep, cold fear that I do not belong anywhere. I am too American for the old Italians who remember the homeland. I am too Italian for the Americans who see me as just another waitress with a dark name. I am the daughter of a postman, scraping by on tips, but I can read a contract that baffles a chief executive officer. I exist in the gray space between the poor and the powerful. I am stuck between the good I want to do and the gray world I seem to understand far too well. That was the life I had built. That was the truce I had made with the city. Tips, night shifts, worrying about my health insurance deductible, trying to get Maya to stop hiding hot peppers in the risotto for the rude customers. It was small, but it was mine. Now, Matteo Vitale's shadow had fallen over all of it. His $10 million joke, his impossible, blank card, that lighthouse. It was not just a metaphor for kindness anymore. It was a beacon, a real one, calling me back to a heritage I never accepted, a world of power and silence I had spent my entire life trying to avoid. But it was here. It was knocking on my door, and I had a sick, sinking feeling that it was not going to go away just because I refused to answer. The shore had just lost power, and my mother's lighthouse was flashing, bright and terrifying, right in my face. The day after I stood on the pier at Bay Ridge, my life was still just my life. I went to my shift. I smiled. I poured wine. I came home. I checked my mail. And there it was. It was not a bill or junk mail. It was a heavy black envelope, the cardstock thick as a door. No return address. My name, Ava Lane, was written on the front in perfect, severe calligraphy. Inside, there was no letter. Just a single piece of paper, a bank transfer confirmation. $250,000 deposited into my checking account. The memo line read, consulting fee. I stared at it. This was not the $100,000 check. That was a joke, a piece of theater. This was silent. This was real. This was not a fee. It was a chain. It was the price of my soul, transferred directly. I felt a cold, clean anger rise in my chest. I did not rip it up. I put on my coat, walked 6 blocks to my bank, and stood in line. The teller, a nice woman named Maria, smiled at me. "How are you, Eva?" "I need to make a wire transfer," I said. I slid her the confirmation slip. "I need to send this exact amount, $250,000, right back to the account it came from." Maria's smile froze. She looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. "All of it, Eva. This is a lot of money." "Yes, all of it, and I need a printed receipt for the transfer. A physical copy, please." She processed it. Her hands were shaking more than mine. She looked at me like I was a lunatic, or a saint, or both. She handed me the receipt. It was a flimsy piece of paper, but it was my proof. It was my Declaration of Independence. I had not just refused the money, I had returned it. I had a paper trail. I walked out of the bank. The air in Queens felt different. The city noise, the background hum I had learned to read, suddenly had a sharp, discordant note in it. I felt it before I saw it, the feeling of being watched. I was halfway to the subway station. 2 men. They were not professionals. Professionals would have been invisible. These men wanted to be seen. One wore a plain green jacket. The other wore a gray hoodie, pulled up. They did not look at me. They just existed, always 20 paces behind me. I crossed the street against the light. They crossed. I stopped at a bodega to pretend to look at oranges. They stopped a few doors down to tie their shoes. My heart was not racing. It was hammering. A low, steady thud against my ribs. This was not a life experiment. This was real. I got on the subway. I stepped into a car. I watched through the window as they boarded. 2 cars behind mine. They were following me home. I got off at my stop. My keys already in my hand, I walked fast down my block. They were closer now. I could hear their footsteps on the pavement. I fumbled with the lock to my apartment building. A car pulled up to the curb. It was not a taxi. It was a black Maserati, so quiet it seemed to glide out of the air itself. The tinted window slid down. Matteo Vitale. He was not wearing his expensive suit. He was in a simple black cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car. He looked bored. "Get in, Eva." I froze. I looked behind me. The two men, the green jacket and the gray hoodie, had stopped. They were just standing there, frozen, staring at the Maserati. They looked confused, and then they looked afraid. "I'm fine," I said, turning back to Matteo. He sighed, a sound of profound impatience. "No, you are not. You just stepped on the tail of the DeLuca group." He did not get out. He just spoke to me, his voice a low command on the sidewalk. The DeLuca group. Developers, the white-collar kind of mafia. They want the entire waterfront. That fake contract you blew up was their key. You cost them a lot more than $10 million. I looked back again. The two men were gone. They had not run. They had just evaporated. "So you are my bodyguard now?" I asked. My voice was sharp, a weapon I was not used to wielding. He almost smiled. "No, I am your creditor." My hand tightened on my purse, on the bank receipt inside. "I already returned your money." "The $250,000, I know. The transfer was impressive." He dismissed it with a wave. "That was not a payment. That was a test. This," he gestured to the empty sidewalk where the men had been, "is the consequence. My little $10 million joke at the restaurant. It was not a joke. It is a signal. In my world, anyone who can break a language trap like that, they get protection, and they owe a debt. I do not owe you anything. You do now. You just used my name to scare those men away, even if you did not know it. Get in the car. We need to talk." I looked at my apartment door. I looked at the black car. I got in. The leather was soft, and it smelled of sandalwood and power. He drove me to Rialto. It was 9 a.m, and the restaurant was closed, sunlight streaming through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. We sat at the same VIP table. He explained. The DeLucas were not brutes. They were worse. They used lawyers and shell companies. They bought politicians. They buried families in paperwork until they lost their homes. The waterfront project was their crown jewel. "And you," I asked. "You are better." "I am a different business," he said simply. As he spoke, I heard a noise, a high-pitched, electric whirring. It sounded like a giant, angry mosquito. "What is that?" It was a drone, a simple quadcopter drone, the kind you buy online. It hovered right outside the main window, 5 feet from my face. It had a small device mounted under it. Matteo did not flinch, his security guard, the man built like a refrigerator, came out from the kitchen, his hand inside his jacket. Matteo raised one finger. The guard stopped. Thwack! A paintball. It hit the glass, exploding in a starburst of bright, thick, red paint. It looked exactly like blood. It was right at my eye level. I jumped, a small, involuntary gasp escaping me. The drone hovered for 1 second more, a mechanical eye staring at me, and then it zipped up and over the building. Matteo was watching me, not the window. A warning from DeLuca. I was staring at the red paint, but I was also staring at the sidewalk below the window, where the plastic shell of the paintball had fallen. I stood up. "They are sloppy," I said. "It is a threat, Eva. It is information." I walked outside, into the morning air. I bent down and picked up the small, curved piece of plastic. I read the tiny print stamped into it, a batch number. I pulled out my phone. I typed in the batch number, the paint brand, the distributor. It was not recreational paint. It was industrial-grade marking paint, sold exclusively by one factory supplier in New Jersey. I kept digging. The factory's parent company, a holding corporation, which was a subsidiary of DeLuca Real Estate Ventures. I read aloud from my phone. I turned and showed the screen to Matteo. He had followed me outside. They sent their own paint. They wanted you to know it was them, or they are just stupid. He looked at me, his face unreadable. You did that in less than 2 minutes. I sell my skill. I said. My voice was dry. The drone incident made the local news blog vandalism at a high-end eatery. The next day, a different kind of man found me. He did not send a car. He found me at the library. At my nighttime study carrel. He wore a suit, but it was cheap. Government issue polyester. It pulled across his shoulders. Miss Lane Agent Noah Kemp. FBI. He flashed a badge. It looked real. My stomach turned to ice. I'm just reading. You are doing a lot more than that. You are the waitress who stopped the entire Red Hook waterfront deal. He sat down across from me, his voice a low, earnest rumble. We know about the DeLucas. We have been trying to build a solid case against them for years. They are clean, on paper. We also know about Matteo Vitale. He slid a folder onto the table. We want to hire you, temporary language consultant. You help us read their code, the contracts, the dialect they use on the docks. In return, we give you full witness protection, a new life. And everyone was offering me a new life. I was starting to like my old one. Protection, I said. Everyone is offering me protection. I felt a strange bubble of hysterical humor. If fate is a bill, I'd like to pay in installments. I looked at Agent Kemp. He seemed tired, but honest. I have one condition. Name it. Money relocation. No, you are building a case against DeLuca. That is fine. But you do not use this as an excuse to round up innocent longshoremen from the docks. You do not arrest people who cannot read their own contracts just to squeeze them for information. You do not treat those families as collateral damage. Agent Kemp looked at me, genuinely surprised. That is your condition, not money. That is my condition. No innocent people. He nodded slowly. I can work with that. I was standing in the middle of a war I had not joined. The government on one side, the mafia on the other, and me, the waitress, in the middle. Matteo called me that evening. He knew about the FBI. He knew everything. Do not trust them, Ava, he said. His voice was cold. Their protection is a holding cell. They will trade your life to make their case. And your protection is better. It is. Stay at my safe house, a penthouse. Guards you will never see. You will be comfortable. You will be safe. I will be your prisoner, I said. You will be my guest. I refuse, I said, and I hung up the phone. I went straight to Rialto, straight to the kitchen. Maya was there, covered in flour, punching down a massive ball of dough. I told her everything. She listened, her dark eyes sharp, never missing a beat. So, she said, slamming the dough onto the steel table, a mafia boss and the feds are fighting over you. My Eva. It is like a telenovela, but with more student debt. She stopped, wiping her floury hands on her apron. This is not funny, though. She went to her locker and came back. She pressed something small and hard into my palm. It was a paring knife, small, wicked sharp, the one she used for peeling apples. This is not a joke, Eva, she said, her voice quiet and fierce. These are not good men. They are just different kinds of powerful men, and they will use you. So, if you have to choose, you choose yourself first, always. I clutched the small wooden handle. It felt cold. That night, I was in my apartment. I had locked the door. I had jammed a chair under the knob. I had the paring knife on my nightstand. I could not sleep. I was staring at the ceiling when I heard it. Click. It was not loud. It was the sound of my lock being jimmied. It was quiet, professional. My blood went cold. I did not scream. I grabbed my phone. I grabbed Maya's paring knife. I rolled off the bed and pressed myself into the small space between the mattress and the wall. My heart was not beating. It was exploding. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, a shadow of a man. He moved silently. He was not looking for me. He was looking for something. He started tossing my apartment, not violently, but methodically. He opened drawers. He went straight to my small, cheap jewelry box on the dresser. I heard the contents scatter. He was looking for the locket. He was looking for the lighthouse. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. I pressed 911. I whispered my address and someone is in my apartment. I hung up. I stared at my phone. The blank business card was on my dresser. I had no number. It was the most insane idea I had ever had. I dialed the main number for Vitaly Logistics, the 24-hour emergency dispatch line. A bored voice answered, "Vitaly Night Dispatch. I have the lighthouse card," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Someone is in my apartment." There was a click. The line went dead. The intruder was in my bedroom now. The beam of his flashlight hit the wall just above my head. I held the stupid little knife, my knuckles white. Then, from the hallway, I heard a crash, the sound of my front door, which had been gently opened, being kicked off its hinges, yelling, a different voice. "Get him!" There was a sound, a short, brutal, heavy sound of a fist hitting bone, a thud, silence, footsteps, heavy, confident, walking into my bedroom. Matteo Vitale stood in the doorway. He was not wearing a sweater or a suit. He was dressed in black. He looked at me, huddled on the floor, holding a paring knife. He looked at my trashed room. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was flat. "No." His security guard, the refrigerator, was dragging the intruder, now unconscious, out of my apartment. I stood up, my legs shaking. I was still holding the knife. Matteo's eyes moved from my face. They landed on my nightstand, where my locket, the one I had been holding, had fallen open. He stopped. He walked over and, without asking, picked it up. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the engraved lighthouse. He turned it over in his hand. "Where?" he said. His voice different. It was not cold. It was sharp. "Where did you get this?" "It was my mother's. Her name was Lena." Matteo looked from the locket to my face. He looked at me like he had never seen me before. "This is an old Vitale symbol," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "From before my father, from Sicily." He met my eyes. My mother. She was supposed to die in a hospital fire 30 years ago. She only survived because a volunteer translator, an Italian woman named Lena, broke protocol and got her out through the service tunnels. He held up the locket. "My mother gave her this as a promise." He stared at me. "Your mother saved my mother's life." In the distance, I finally heard the faint wail of police sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through my window. Matteo had arrived before the New York Police Department. He looked at me, the locket still in his hand, the power dynamic, the debt, the threats, all of it shattered and reformed in that instant. "This is not about a contract anymore," he said, his voice low and intense. "This is about a blood debt. And the DeLucas, they just tried to steal a marker for that debt. They just made this personal. The police came. I told them what I knew, which was the truth. A man broke in. Another man stopped him. By the time they finished taking my report, the intruder, his unconscious body, and Matteo Vitale were long gone. The police officers looked at my trashed apartment, looked at me, a waitress in Queens, and I could see the calculation in their eyes. This was not a random burglary. This was something they did not want to touch. I did not sleep in my apartment that night or any night after. Maya insisted I stay with her, on the lumpy futon in her living room, surrounded by her collection of cookbooks. My life split into 3. By day, I was still Eva Lane, waitress at Rialto. I poured wine, I smiled, I took orders. The red paint was still on the window, a constant, bloody reminder. By night, I was Eva Lane, contractor. I accepted Agent Noah Kemp's offer, but on my terms, I was not an agent. I was not an employee. I was a community language consultant, paid a per diem that was barely above minimum wage. I signed the paperwork at a Starbucks, not an office. This gave me access. It gave me a flimsy layer of protection, but it kept me separate. Agent Kemp would meet me, passing me encrypted flash drives loaded with documents, port manifests, subpoenaed bank records, intercepted emails, all in coded dialect. "We think DeLuca is moving money," and he would say, looking tired. We just cannot prove it. And then there was the third Ava, the one who met with Matteo Vitale. He was playing his own game. He was not waiting for the FBI. He was waging a war of paper. He had unleashed his own lawyers, a silent army, creating a complex web of shell companies designed to intercept and dismantle Aurelio De Luca's waterfront deal. It was a mirror image of De Luca's own strategy. It was a chess match, played with corporate filings instead of bullets. The enemy, I was learning, was not just one man, it was a system. Aurelio De Luca was the public face, a sophisticated, handsome developer who appeared on local news channels talking about revitalizing the waterfront. He was always flanked by his lawyer, Karina Vale. She was a woman with blonde hair pulled into a severe knot and an icy smile that never reached her eyes. She spoke in perfectly crafted public relations sound bites about community partnerships and affordable housing. While she spoke, a digital army was at work, a bot farm. Suddenly, the Rialto's online reviews were flooded with 1-star ratings. They mentioned a rude, dark-haired waitress. They said I had an attitude problem. Fake blogs popped up, accusing me of being a known associate of organized crime. It was a smear campaign designed to discredit me, to make me a liability to Agent Kemp, to anyone who might listen to me. I ignored it. I focused on the work. Agent Kemp gave me access to the port's shipping manifests. I sat in Maya's apartment, my laptop warm on my knees, staring at lists of container numbers, thousands of them. It was noise. But then I saw it. An anomaly, a small symbol, just a few letters and numbers, stenciled onto a specific series of containers. It was not standard maritime code. I cross-referenced it with my mother's old shoebox of notes. It was not in there. It was something new. I cross-referenced it again, this time with the public records for De Luca's shell companies, and I found it. The containers with the strange code were all consigned to a single entity, the Red Hook Community Housing Fund, the same affordable housing project Karina Vale was always praising. But the fund was fake. I followed the money through 3 different states and 2 offshore accounts. It was a laundry. De Luca was using the fake housing fund to wash millions of dollars. The container codes, I realized, were his private ledger. They were tracking the movement of illicit cash, or maybe something worse, right under the nose of the port police. The same port police who seemed to conveniently take their coffee breaks every time one of those containers was unloaded. He was displacing the residents of the waterfront and using a fund with their name on it to do it. My connection to Matteo Vitale was now a known secret. He did not call. He did not come to my apartment, but he requested my presence. His mother wanted to meet me. A black car, not the Maserati, picked me up from Maya's. It took me to a sprawling, fortress-like house in Tuxedo Park. It was old money, cold money. Adriana Vitale was nothing like her son. He was modern, sleek. She was old world, a queen dowager dressed in black silk, her gray hair piled perfectly on her head. She sat in a room that looked like a museum. She did not rise when I entered. "Miss Lane," she said. Her voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet. "So you are the girl." "I am Eva. My son tells me your mother saved my life." She studied me, her eyes dark and shrewd. It was a long time ago. Lena, she was a good woman. She understood her place. The implication was clear. I did not. "I am here," I said, my hands clasped in front of me. "Yes, you are." She gestured to a chair. "You've involved yourself in a family matter. This business with the locket. It is a debt, a Vitale debt. It will be honored." She said the word debt like it was something distasteful. "I did not ask to collect," I said. "And yet, here you are. My son, he has a fascination with your skills." She clearly did not like me. She saw me as a complication, a low-born girl dragging her son back into the spotlight he had worked so hard to avoid. But she was bound by the code, the lighthouse. "You will be protected, but do not mistake a debt for a welcome, child. You are a waitress." "Remember that," I respected her. She was transparent in her contempt. Matteo was waiting for me outside. He was leaning against his car as the sun set. "My mother is traditional," he said, as if apologizing for her. "She's honest," I replied. He looked at me, the fading light catching the angles of his face. He was still holding on to that strange, dark amusement he had. "I am reevaluating my offer. Eva," he said. "I am not interested." "You have not heard it. My private translator. $10 million. He paused. "And a wedding in Venice." It was not a joke this time. It was a proposal, a business proposal, a way to bind me to him, to put me under his name, his protection, a golden cage. I looked at him, the most powerful man I had ever met, offering me a fantasy. "I'm still not for sale, Mr. Vitale," I said, my voice quiet. "But I'm willing to help the people you are all fighting over, the homeless, the tenants, the families on the waterfront that De Luca is trying to erase." His smile faded. He had offered me a kingdom, and I had handed him a social work pamphlet. "That is not my business," and he said. "It is mine." I meant it. The next day, I went to St. Brigid's, the old Catholic church in the neighborhood that ran a soup kitchen. I spoke to the priest. I put up a flyer, written in English, Italian, and Spanish. "Know your contract. Do not be fooled by the fine print. Free translation and legal reading. Wednesday nights, basement." My first class, 3 people came. The next week, 6. By the end of the month, I had 20 people crammed into the drafty basement, holding their rental agreements, their loan documents, their eviction notices. All from De Luca's shell companies. I taught them. I showed them the traps, the penalty clauses, the waiver of rights. It was a small, quiet act. In this war, it was the equivalent of building a bomb. It was kind, and it was dangerous. De Luca hit back, not at me, but at Matteo. A raid, a massive media circus of a raid on the Vitale container yards, the port police, even a few FBI agents. They had received an anonymous tip. Contraband, weapons. The news was everywhere. Matteo Vitale, under investigation. Agent Kemp called me, furious. This was not my team. This was a different unit, acting on a tip from the Port Authority. They are trying to squeeze Vitale. I was at my laptop. The documents from the raid spread across Maya's floor. The tip, it was too clean. It listed container numbers, shipping routes, arrival times. It was perfect information. It was a leak from inside Vitale's operation. I went back to the original contract, the one I had stopped at Rialto, the one with the Neapolitan dialect. I had been focused on the penalty clause. I had missed something. I read it again. And again, it was not just a contract. It was a map. Buried in the logistics boilerplate, in the coded port jargon my mother had taught me, was a schedule, a key. It was a back door. The leak was not a person. It was a piece of code, a Trojan horse buried in Vitale's own shipping software, and it was sending automated tips to De Luca, who was feeding them to the corrupt port police. It was designed to frame Matteo, to use the law to take him off the board. "I have to go," I told Maya. "I have to warn him. Eva, no. It is 9 o'clock at night. You are not his responsibility. He is being framed. This is my fault. I grabbed my coat. Maya grabbed hers. Then I am going with you. You are not walking alone." We did not get 2 blocks from her apartment. A dark van, a windowless Ford, screeched around the corner and blocked the sidewalk. No plates. 2 men got out. They were not the clumsy watchers from before. These men were built, fast and silent. They moved with purpose. They were not there to scare us. They were there to take us. Maya screamed. 1 man grabbed her. I raised Maya's paring knife, the one I now carried everywhere. A Maserati slid around the corner, its headlights pinning us all in a high beam. It blocked the van. Matteo got out of the driver's side. He was alone. He was not wearing a jacket. He was not carrying a weapon. The 2 men froze. They still held Maya. "Let her go," Matteo said. His voice was not loud. It was conversational. The man holding Maya laughed. "Or what? Mr. Vitale, you and your waitress." Matteo did not look at them. He looked at me. "The leak," he said. "You found it. It is in your software. I said, my voice shaking. A back door. It is a data map. It is framing you. Matteo nodded, as if I had just confirmed the weather. He looked back at the two men. Your boss, Aurelio, Matteo said calmly. He is smart, but he is not as smart as she is. He took a step forward. Tell your boss that the back door from Riccardi is now closed. The men's expressions tightened. They knew that name. Matteo continued, his voice as casual as if he were ordering dinner. And tell him that I know about the offshore account in the Caymans, the one tied to the housing fund. He recited an account number, the main account, the one I had found, the one I had not even told Agent Kemp about yet. The men stopped moving. This was not a kidnapping. This was an execution of a different kind. They had been sent to grab a waitress, and they had just walked into the middle of a data war they did not understand. The man let go of Maya. She scrambled behind me. Tell him, Matteo said, that if another hand is laid on either of these women, I will not send lawyers. I will not send data. I will come myself. The two men looked at each other. Their orders had changed. They got back in the van. It backed up, screeched a U-turn, and disappeared. I was breathing so hard I felt dizzy. Maya was clutching my arm. Matteo looked at us. He looked at the paring knife still in my hand. He looked tired. Riccardi was my head of logistics, he said. He will no longer be a problem. He had saved us. He had done it with no violence. He had done it with information. My information. I stood there, on a dark street in Queens, my heart hammering. I was beginning to question everything. My kindness, my little workshops. Had they been exploited? Had they put Maya in danger? I set a new rule for myself. Right there. I will help anyone who is being crushed by the fine print. I will help the families, the workers. I will not, ever, help evil legitimize itself. I looked at Matteo Vitale, a man who had just used a bank account number like a loaded gun. The problem was I was no longer sure which side was which. The Waterfront Planning Commission meeting was not held in a basement. It was held in the main atrium of City Hall, a grand, domed room built to project power, and it was a media circus. Every local news channel was there, their cameras pointed at the stage. This, Aurelio De Luca had decided, was where he would legitimize his theft. This was where the city council, dazzled by his talk of revitalization and tax revenue, would rubber stamp his plan to erase the waterfront community. I was there. I had been invited, a formal invitation, embossed with the city seal. As an official community language consultant, your presence is requested to ensure transparency for all residents. It was a trap, and Aurelio had said it himself. He wanted me on stage, under the hot lights, where he could discredit me publicly. I sat at a small table to the side, a pitcher of water and a microphone in front of me. I watched Aurelio De Luca, handsome and smooth in a perfectly tailored blue suit, take the podium. His lawyer, Karina Vale, sat behind him, her icy smile fixed in place. "We are," here Aurelio began, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "to build a better New York, a New York with clean, safe, affordable housing for everyone." He spoke for 10 minutes. He showed beautiful architectural renderings of glass towers. The council members nodded, the community members, the longshoremen and their families, the tenants from my basement classes, sat in the back rows, looking confused and defeated. Then he turned. His smile widened. But transparency is key, which is why we must address a difficult truth. There are forces working against this progress. Forces that profit from the old ways. He nodded to Karina Vale, a massive screen above the stage, the one that had been showing pictures of parks and happy families. Flickered to life. It was a video, grainy, shot from a distance. It was me. Standing outside the bank, a man in a dark suit, Matteo's man, was handing me the heavy black envelope, the one with the bank transfer confirmation. The video zoomed in on the paper. $250,000. The room gasped. Agent Noah Kemp, standing by the wall, went rigid. Aurelio's voice dripped with fake sorrow. "We have confirmed this transfer. from Vitale Logistics, we are all deeply saddened to learn that Miss Eva Lane, our supposed community consultant, is, in fact, a paid operative for the Vitale crime family, sent to sabotage this vital project. The cameras swiveled from him to me. I was trapped in the sudden, blinding light, the bot farm, the online smears. It had all been leading to this. He was painting me as a paid liar. I stood up. My legs felt like water. I walked to the podium. Aurelio stepped aside, a look of faux pity on his face. "He is right," I said into the microphone. My voice was small, but the microphone carried it. The room went dead silent. "He is right that I received a bank transfer for $250,000. Aurelio looked confused. This was not part of his script. I reached into my pocket, not for the locket, not for the paring knife. I pulled out a single, flimsy, folded piece of paper, the receipt from the bank teller. "What Mr. DeLuca forgot to show you," I said, holding the receipt up for the nearest camera, "is the second half of the transaction, the one from 10 minutes later, the wire transfer receipt, returning every single cent, because unlike Mr. DeLuca, I am not for sale." Karina Vale's smile vanished. Aurelio's face tightened. "He tried to buy my silence," I continued, my voice getting stronger, colder. Why would he spend $250,000 to silence a waitress?" I turned to the screen. "Put up the zoning proposal," I said to the technician, "page 42, Appendix C." The video disappeared, replaced by a dense wall of text. "I am here to translate," I said. "So let me translate." I pointed to a line of text. "This line here, Community Impact Review Waiver, Section 4. It does not look like much, but in the specific legal code it cites, it means that for any tenant in a rent-controlled building, their lease is immediately voided upon groundbreaking. It means eviction for everyone." I pointed to another line, "And this Maritime Logistics Preference Clause. That sounds boring. What it means is that any business on the pier that does not sign an exclusive logistics contract with DeLuca's new shipping company, the one he founded last week in Delaware, will have their docking rights revoked. He's not just stealing their homes, he's stealing their jobs." I went on. For 5 minutes, I tore his proposal apart, line by line, translating the bureaucraties into plain, brutal English. I exposed every trap, every lie, every coded clause. The room was exploding. The families in the back were standing, shouting. The council members looked pale. The news anchors were talking a mile a minute. Agent Noah Kemp was on his radio. "We have him. We have him on conspiracy. Fraud. Move in. Move in now." His team started moving toward the doors. It was chaos. And in the chaos, my phone buzzed. It was a text, not from Mateo, not from Maya, from an unknown number. It was a photograph. Maya, she was in a dark space. Her mouth was taped. Her eyes were wide with terror. She was tied to a chair. Behind her, I could see the stenciled code on the wall of a shipping container. A new text came in, from Aurelio DeLuca. He was still on the stage, watching me, smiling. "Stop talking, Ava. Tell the federal agents to stand down, or the baker dies. Your move." My blood went cold, and he was not just a white-collar criminal. He was a monster. The FBI was moving in, but they were moving toward the stage. They were coming for Aurelio. If they arrested him, his men at the container yard would get the call. Maya would be dead. I had to stop them. I had to warn the right people. I grabbed the microphone. I looked past the cameras to the back of the room where a few longshoremen I recognized from my class were standing, looking confused. I spoke, not in English, not in clean Italian. I spoke in the old dialect, the Sicilian port dialect my mother had written on scraps of paper, a dialect almost no one used anymore. "The lighthouse is dark," I said, my voice ringing out. "The eastern crane is compromised. The innocent are trapped." It was not a call for help. It was a signal. It meant, the law is blind. Our own are in danger. Protect the innocent. The longshoremen looked at each other. They understood. They began to move. not in panic, but with purpose, heading for the doors. My phone rang. It was Aurelio. "You are not clever, Gout," he hissed. My other phone, the cheap burner I used for my classes, rang. It was Matteo. I looked at my laptop, which was open to the zoning proposal. I hit a key. I went to my phone's live streaming app, the one I used to broadcast my classes. I hit Go Live. The audio from my phone was now broadcasting to the world, patched into the City Hall feed. I answered both calls. I merged them. "You are both on the air," I said, my voice flat. "The entire city is listening." Silence. "Eva, what the hell are you doing?" That was Matteo. "You bitch." That was Aurelio. "Aurelio," I said, my voice clinical, "you have Maya Ortiz. You are streaming live to every news channel in New York. I will kill her." He screamed. "Matteo," I said, "he has Maya. At the container yard. He will kill her if the FBI moves. My men are 2 minutes out." Matteo's voice was a blade. "I will end this. I will end him." "No," I said. I was shouting now. "No violence. You do not touch him. You prove you are different. You hear me. You prove it. Right now." I looked at the picture Aurelio had sent me, the stenciled numbers on the container. It was his private ledger. The same code I had broken before. I was translating their threats. Live. He says he will put a bullet in her head. "Matteo, you move. She dies. Tell him he is a dead man." Matteo growled. "He knows," I said. And as I spoke, I was typing the container code into the Port Authority's public tracking system. The system was slow. The data was old. "Keep talking, Aurelio," I said into the phone. "Where is she? Tell me, or I tell Matteo to move." "You are bluffing," he sneered. "Am I—" My laptop screen refreshed. The container code. It had a GPS tag. It was active. Container 47B, Pier 9, North End. "1. He has her at Pier 9, I said, my voice clear, into the live feed. "Container 47B. He's there right now." I looked at Agent Kemp, who was frozen, listening to the feed on his earpiece. His eyes went wide. He started speaking into his radio, diverting his teams. "Matteo," I said, my voice pleading. "He is trapped. The feds are going. You do not need to do this. Get her out. Get her out clean." There was a long pause on Matteo's end. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the war inside him, the monster that wanted the fast win, the blood, and the man who had listened to me. "The lighthouse is dark," Matteo said, using my words. It was not a command for violence. It was a command for a rescue. "Secure Pier 9. Safe passage for the girl. No contact." The line clicked dead. What happened next, I saw on the news feeds later. Aurelio was waiting, his gun to Maya's head. He was waiting for Matteo's killers. He did not see the longshoremen. They emerged from the shadows of the yard, dozens of them. They did not attack. They just appeared. They opened other containers, creating a wall. They started a forklift, creating a diversion. They formed a human corridor, a safe path, and down that path. Agent Noah Kemp and his team moved in, silent and fast. They had Aurelio in cuffs before he even saw them. He was arrested based on the live broadcast, the decoded GPS data, and the mountain of translated contracts I had given them. I saw Matteo when he was on the roof of a warehouse across the yard, watching the whole thing through binoculars. He had a man next to him, a sniper. His enemy was helpless, being led away in cuffs. It was the perfect moment to clean up the problem, to end the DeLuca threat forever. Matteo watched. He watched them put Aurelio in the car, and he gave a single, sharp shake of his head. No. He let the law take him. He turned. The monster inside him finally, terribly, leashed. I was outside City Hall, wrapped in a shock blanket. Maya was next to me, crying, safe, drinking hot coffee. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. Eva Lane, what do you have to say?" I looked straight into the camera. My voice was raw. "New York is not for sale," I said, my words echoing across the internet, the tide of smear and hate turning in an instant. "The small people, They deserve to read the fine print. The chaos of City Hall faded. It was replaced by the methodical, quiet grinding of the legal system. Aurelio De Luca was in federal custody. Bail was denied, the live streamed, multi-call confession, combined with the mountain of translated documents I had provided, was an ironclad case. He was facing charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, and kidnapping. His perfect blue suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Karina Vale, his icy public relations lawyer, was not arrested. She faced a different kind of execution, the New York Bar Association, horrified by the public display of ethics violations, suspended her license pending a full investigation. Her career was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating click of her name being removed from the firm's letterhead. The corrupt port police who had been on De Luca's payroll were suspended, their badges taken, facing their own federal investigation. The system, the one Aurelio had played like a violin, had turned on him with blinding, surgical precision. The Red Hook Community Housing Fund, De Luca's fake charity, was seized by the government, but the story did not end there. 2 days after the arrest, a new entity appeared. A charter was filed with the state, the Lighthouse Community Trust. It was not a shell company. It was a fully legal, transparent, nonprofit organization, its charter explicitly stating its mission to protect the current residents of the waterfront, secure affordable housing, and provide community legal services. The seed money for the trust was astronomical. An anonymous donation, $10 million, enough to buy out the predatory contracts De Luca had issued, enough to secure the buildings, enough to fund my legal translation classes for the next 50 years. The donation was untraceable, routed through a bank in Switzerland, but I knew whose money it was. Matteo had taken his $10 million joke, the one he had made over wine at Rialto, and he had turned it into a quiet, anonymous promise. He had laundered his own wealth into something clean. I did not see him. I did not see Matteo Vitali for weeks. After the flashing lights, after I watched Maya get loaded into an ambulance for observation, after Agent Kemp had taken my final statement, we simply stopped. The connection was cut. It was a necessary silence. I needed to breathe. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet and remember who I was when I was not a chess piece in a war between 2 powerful men. I needed air that did not smell of his expensive cologne and the metallic tang of his control. And he, I think, needed to learn how to exist without controlling the board. He had made a choice on that rooftop, the choice to leash the monster, to let the law work. Now he had to live with that choice. The silence was a relief. It felt like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. My old life was over. I could not go back to Rialto. The restaurant itself was closed for renovations, the blood-red paintball stains still on the window. I was a public figure. My face had been on every news channel, my voice on every blog. The waitress who translated the truth. I was a minor, local hero. I quit. Maya quit with me. She said she was tired of smelling like burnt sugar and fear. She was going to open her own pastry shop. I'm going to get a small business loan from that new Lighthouse Trust, she told me, her eyes bright for the first time in weeks. I am going to make cannolis, not war. Instead of Matteo, his mother came to me. Adriana Vitali did not summon me to her stone fortress in Tuxedo Park. She came to me. She found me in the basement of St. Brigid's. I was packing up my dictionaries and my maps. She stood in the doorway, a vision in black silk, looking impossibly elegant against the peeling linoleum and water-stained walls. Her security guard waited in the hall. "Miss Lane?" she said. Her voice was not cold this time. It was just quiet. "Mrs. Vitale?" I stopped folding a map of the port. She walked into the room, her dark eyes scanning the folding chairs, the old coffee machine. "My son, he does not know how to do things by half. He is intense. He gets it from you." I said. A tiny brief smile touched her lips. "Yes, He does. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out something. It was not a locket. It was an old photograph. The edges curled, the black and white faded to gray. She handed it to me. It was a picture of two young women, standing outside a hospital, smiling. One was clearly a younger Adriana, proud and sharp even then. The other. I drew in a sharp breath. It was my mother, Lena. She looked just like me, but her smile was wider, easier, without the layers of caution I had built. This was taken at a hospital benefit, 1988, Adriana said, just before the fire. She proceeded to tell me the real story, not the clean version Matteo had given me. My husband's rivals. They were not like DeLuca. They did not use contracts and lawyers. They used gasoline and matches. She had been in the maternity ward, holding her newborn son. Matteo, it was not an accident, it was an assassination attempt. Her guards in the hallway were killed. The fire was set to cover the tracks, to eliminate her and the Vitali heir. Everyone ran. Adriana whispered, her eyes looking past me, into the memory. The nurses, the orderlies, they ran for their lives. The fire was everywhere. She focused on me, her eyes sharp. But your mother, Lena, she was a volunteer, a translator for the immigrant families. She heard me screaming. I was screaming for my baby. In Sicilian. Adriana's voice was thick. She came into the room, through the smoke. She did not run away. She ran in. She grabbed my son. She said, I know the tunnels. I work in the laundry, too. She knew the service passages under the hospital. She let us out, through the smoke, through the dark. She saved us. Both of us. My hand went to the locket under my shirt. It was not a gift, Adriana said, seeing my movement. It was a promise. I gave it to her. It was my father's symbol, from the old country. It meant the Vitale family owed her a life, my son's life, a blood debt. She looked at me, a long, appraising look. My son has spent his whole life trying to escape that world, trying to be a legitimate businessman, and you, her daughter, you dragged him right back into it. She took a step closer. And you showed him how to win without firing a shot. You showed him a different kind of power. She touched my arm, her gloved hand resting lightly on my sleeve. The debt is paid, child, in full, by both of you. You have my thanks. She turned and walked out of the basement, leaving me alone, holding the picture of my mother, the hero. Life began to find a new rhythm. The noise of the city, which had been a constant scream of sirens and threats, softened. I began to hear the normal sounds again, the rumble of the subway under my feet, the distant horn of a ship coming into the harbor. The city was breathing again. Agent Noah Kemp met me for coffee, not at a library, not at a safe house, at a crowded coffee shop in my neighborhood. Lane, he said, sliding a cup across the table. He looked tired, but satisfied. DeLuca is pleading out. He will be gone for at least 20 years. Your testimony, your translations. It was perfect. You dismantled his entire organization. He slid a thick envelope across the table. It had the official seal of the Department of Justice. This is a formal offer, he said. Senior language analyst, FBI, full-time, good salary, government benefits, a pension. It was everything my father, the postman, would have ever wanted for me. Safety, security, respectability, a government job. I looked at the envelope. I thought about the families in the basement, their faces lit with new understanding. I will accept, I said. Kemp smiled. Good, welcome aboard. On one condition, miss. His smile vanished. Lane, you and your conditions. Part-time, I said. I will give you 20 hours a week. I will be your analyst. I will read your contracts. I will break your codes. But the other 20 hours, they belong to me. They belong to the Lighthouse Trust. They belong to my classes. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head, a look of baffled respect on his face. You drive the hardest bargain of anyone I have ever met. Deal. We shook hands. a contract, one that I had written myself. I did not hear from Mateo for another week. Then my cheap burner phone rang. "Eva?" His voice. It was not the voice of a boss. It was not the voice of a predator. It was just his Mateo. "I know where she is buried," he said. He did not have to explain. He meant my mother. He asked me to meet him at Greenwood Cemetery. I went. It was a cold, bright afternoon. The wind was sharp, blowing the last of the dead leaves across the rolling hills. I found him standing by her grave. It was a simple stone. Lena Lane, beloved mother. He was not in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a heavy wool coat. He looked younger and infinitely more tired. He was holding a small spray of flowers, not roses, not lilies. "Olive branches," he said, his voice quiet. He bent down and placed them gently on the stone. For peace. I thought she had earned it. We stood there for a long time. The wind whipped my hair across my face. "I cleaned house," Ninami said, staring at the name on the stone. "I fired Riccardi, the man who planted the back door. I fired half my board. We are renegotiating our company standards. That is good, Mateo." He turned to face me. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, I saw no games, no calculations, just a man. "I'm not joking anymore. Eva," he said, his voice low. "The $10 million. The wedding in Venice. That was a joke. It was a test. It was stupid. I know. This is not—" He took a deep breath, the cold air misting in front of his lips. "I'm still a very rich man, and you are still the most stubborn, infuriating and honorable woman I have ever met." He looked from me to the grave and back. "If one day you ever decide to say yes to me, not to my money, but to me, that $10 million, it goes straight into the Lighthouse Trust, all of it, the day you say yes." He gave a small, wry smile. "Consider it a dowry of kindness." He was offering me a new contract, a different one based not on power, but on partnership. I did not answer him. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I just reached out, my hand cold, and I took his fingers were cold too, but they were strong, and they closed around mine. We stood there, in the wind, in front of my mother's grave. We were not bowing to the past. We were just standing. That night, I held my class. The basement at St. Bridget's was full. Maya was there, handing out free pastries from her new bakery. The proof is in the pastry. I stood in front of the old blackboard. I thought about contracts and debts and promises. I thought about my mother and the fire. I thought about Mateo and the olive branches. I picked up a piece of chalk. I wrote on the wall, in big, clear letters for everyone to read, "Kindness is a contract you sign with yourself." 1 year passed. The basement at St. Bridget's, with its peeling paint and bad coffee, was gone. In its place, on the waterfront itself, stood the Lighthouse Center. It was not a glass tower. It was an old brick warehouse, beautifully restored, with wide, clean windows that let in the harbor light. Inside the entrance, set into a simple frame behind thick glass, was my mother's locket, the dented silver, the worn lighthouse engraving. It was the first thing everyone saw when they walked in. It was our founding document, our statement of purpose. I was standing at the front of the main room. It was packed. New faces, old faces, people from the neighborhood, new immigrants fumbling with official letters, old longshoremen sitting in the front row, their arms crossed. It was the first class of the new session. "My name is Eva Lane," I started. My voice was steady. A little over 1 year ago, I was a waitress. I was standing in a room, and a powerful man offered me $10 million and a wedding to translate one document. A few people chuckled. The story had become a piece of waterfront folklore. I smiled. Looking at the familiar faces in the crowd, Maya was in the back, leaning against a wall, covered in flour. She winked at me. I turned him down. I continued. The room was quiet. I chose something else. I chose a kinder city. I chose a city where everyone, no matter where you come from or what language you speak, gets to read the fine print. The back door of the center opened, creaking softly. Matteo Vitale slipped in. He was late. He looked different. The sharp edges were still there. The expensive coat was still perfect. But he was no longer a man at war. He was just Matteo. He walked quietly up the side aisle as I continued my lesson, explaining the predatory clauses in payday loan agreements. He did not interrupt. He did not try to take control. He just stood in the back, next to Maya, and he watched me. When the class ended and the people had begun to filter out, bringing their questions and their paperwork to the volunteer lawyers, he walked up to me. "You are a very good teacher, Eva," he said. His voice was low, for me only. "You are late," I replied, stacking my papers. I had to pick something up. He reached into the pocket of his wool coat. He did not pull out a business card. He pulled out a small, worn velvet box. It was black, the color faded to gray at the corners, clearly ancient. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of faded silk, was a ring. It was not a diamond. I would have hated a diamond. It was an old gold signet ring, heavy and worn smooth with time, and carved into the flat face of it was a lighthouse. "It was my grandmother's," he said, his voice quiet. "From Sicily. She gave it to my mother." I stared at it. It was the twin of my locket, the same stark lines, the same single beam of light. "I'm still holding to my promise," he said. "The $10 million, the dowry of kindness, if you say yes." I looked up at him. I felt the weight of the last year, the fear, the fight, the truce. I was about to speak, to start my conditions, the ones I had been practicing in my head for months. But he raised a hand, his glove still on, stopping me. "But," he said, "I need you to know something first. The money. It has been in the Lighthouse Trust for the last 30 days, all $10 million. It cleared the bank last month." I was stunned. I could not speak, but I did not say yes. "I know." He looked at me, his eyes clear of all games. "It does not matter what you say today, Eva. The money was never a negotiation. It was a promise. I am here for your answer, not for your agreement to the terms. The terms are already met." I did not know what to say. The power dynamic, the one I had fought so hard to balance, the one that had defined us. He had just erased it. He had given me everything before I even had a chance to ask for it. "How?" I whispered. $10 million. The FBI. The Department of Justice. They just let you move that much money into a trust that I am co-running. A new voice came from the doorway. We did not just let him. We encouraged him. Agent Noah Kemp walked in. He was not wearing his government suit. He was wearing jeans and a leather jacket. He looked relaxed. He smiled at me. "Noah," I said, completely confused. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting my aunt," he said. He nodded toward the door he had just entered. Adriana Vitale walked in. She was not in her old-world black silk. She wore a sharp, modern black pantsuit. She looked at her son, then at me. I looked at Adriana. I looked at Noah Kemp. The name, Kemp, it was an American name, a non-Italian name. Your aunt," I stammered. Adriana smiled, a real, warm smile that changed her entire face. "My sister married an American, a federal prosecutor of all things. Noah is my nephew." My mind was reeling. I was trying to connect the dots. The FBI, the Vitale family. "You knew?" I said to Noah. "You knew who he was, who your aunt was, this entire time you were investigating." "Of course," Noah said, walking over to stand next to her. "I have been investigating the DeLucas for 5 years, but the law is slow, and my family has certain rules. We do not cross certain lines." Adriana stepped forward. Her gaze was soft. "The lighthouse. Child. It was a promise between 2 women, your mother, Lena, and me. We created an alliance, long ago, a vow that the law, She nodded at Noah. And the underworld. She nodded at Mateo. That we would find a way to protect the innocent who were trapped between us. That we would be the lighthouse when the shore lost power. She looked at Noah and then at Mateo. My nephew fights for the law. My son fights for the family. But I fight for the promise. I looked at the ring. I looked at Adriana. I was not a chess piece. I was not a complication. I was not a waitress they had stumbled upon. I was the inheritor, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. My mother passed the promise to me. You were all guiding me, testing me. We were waiting for you, Adriana said, her hand resting on her son's arm, to see if you were your mother's daughter. And you are. You are the moral heir to the vow. I turned back to Mateo, and he was just watching me, waiting. He'd given me everything, and he had revealed the final truth. He had returned the power to me. I took a deep breath. I will marry you. His shoulders, which I had never seen slump, relaxed in a relief that was so profound it was almost invisible. But, I said, he smiled, a real, genuine smile. Of course. There are conditions. Yes. I was not a girl being saved. I was a partner. This was a contract. First, the Lighthouse Trust. You are a donor, but I am the director. Full public transparency. Every dollar accounted for. Every year. No secrets. Done, he said. Second, I stepped closer to him. A new vow, a moral clause, for us. I picked up a piece of paper from my desk, a blank sheet. I picked up a pen. You will sign it, with me. What does it say? He asked. It says we will never use violence when another choice is available. We will never use fear when kindness can do the work. We will always, always choose the clean win. We will be the lighthouse. He did not hesitate. He took the pen from my desk. That is the easiest contract I've ever signed. He signed his name. Matteo Vitale. I signed mine. Eva Lane. Our wedding was not in Venice. It was not in a grand cathedral. It was at City Hall, on a rainy Tuesday. The only people there were Adriana, Noah, and Maya. I wore a simple white dress I had bought for $100. He wore his best dark suit. We stood before a judge. We signed the legal documents. It was simple. It was quiet. It was binding. Afterward, we did not have a reception at Rialto. We went to the Lighthouse Center. We had funded a free dinner for the entire waterfront community. Hundreds of people were there, eating pasta and bread from Maya's new bakery. It was loud and warm and real. As we walked in, Maya, my maid of honor, ran up to us. "No rice in the center," she yelled, laughing, and she threw a huge handful of powdered sugar all over us. It went into Mateo's perfect black hair, onto his expensive suit, and I laughed. I laughed until I cried, as the sugar dusted my face. A few local reporters had shown up, the ones who had followed the story from the beginning. A woman with a camera pushed a microphone toward me. Eva, you got the money and the man. What do you have to say to the city now?" I looked at her. I thought about the first day, at Rialto, the check, the fear, the line that had come from my mother's soul, a line I translated 1 year ago. I said, my voice clear, my hand in Mateo's. I said, "I do not sell my soul." That is not just my line anymore. It is the first line of the Charter for the Lighthouse Trust. It is our mission statement. That night, we were not in a penthouse. We were not in a mansion. We were in my old apartment in Queens. It was the only place I had wanted to be. We were sitting on the fire escape, looking out at the city lights. The noise of the city was not a threat anymore. It was just a heartbeat. Mateo was quiet, his arm around me, shielding me from the chill. "The $10 million was a joke, you know," he whispered, his lips against my hair. "A stupid test, but the words you said, 'I am not on sale,' that was the truest thing I had ever heard." I leaned my head on his shoulder. I looked out at the lights of the bridges, the endless pulsing energy of New York. "The joke brought you to me, Mateo," I answered. "But the truth is what made you stay." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from. Please, drop a comment below and let me know. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you want to support this channel even more, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.